Okay, in this video lesson, we'll be looking at angles and eventually segue into coterminal. So we'll start with angles. First of all, we're looking at two different types of angles, positive angles and negative angles. Positive angles are created by rotating counterclockwise around the origin of a coordinate system. Again, we'll start at the x-axis, and if we went counterclockwise, we would actually go through quadrants 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order. But if it was a negative angle, we're simply rotating in a clockwise direction, just the opposite of the previous. Same thing in a coordinate system, would be going through quadrants 4, 3, 2, 1 in that order. The last thing we'll look at is an angle in what's said to be standard position. If it's in standard position, its vertex is at the origin, and one of its rays will be on the actual x-axis. That's what puts it at standard position. The ray on the x-axis is called the initial side, and the other side is the terminal. So I have a couple diagrams. So there's our Cartesian plane, there's our initial ray, and then because it opened in a counterclockwise direction, positive angle. And to designate that it is a positive angle, the little arc with the arrow will indicate that it did open up in a counterclockwise direction. Similarly, if I start with my initial and it shows that I'm opening in a clockwise direction, negative angle. In both of these illustrations, and again here you'll see the arc is showing that it did open in a clockwise direction. On both of these illustrations, my initial side happens to be on the x-axis. That's the criteria for it being in standard position. And there's my terminal side. So both of these angles are said to be in standard position, while the first one open counterclockwise, positive, open clockwise, negative. So we'll take that understanding and segue and transition to coterminal angles. Well, as the word indicates, terminal, same terminal angle. So, angles in standard position who share the same terminal side. And to reiterate, if they are in standard position, that means the initial side was actually on the x-axis. So coterminal angles, one can conclude, has both the same initial and terminal sides. Got this little applet here to kind of illustrate. All right. So what we have here are two separate angles. We've got angle ABC in blue and angle DBC. And what will happen is I'm going to move D to be 10 degrees to make it a little easier for illustration purposes. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to alter where A is. And so if I first put A, having the exact same initial and terminal creates two coterminal angles. Exact same initial, exact same terminal. So now if I start going around the Cartesian plane, and again, notice I'm going in a counterclockwise direction, so my angle is positive. If I continue to rotate around the entire circle, I end up with another coterminal angle. So 10 degrees was the initial angle, ABC, and now angle DBC has the exact same initial, exact same terminal, fits the criteria for being coterminal. So if I kept going around another time on an additional 360 degrees, every time I hit it, another coterminal angle. So 730 and 10 degrees coterminal. Did it again, additional 360, another set of coterminal angles. So one can begin to conclude that there are an infinite number of coterminal angles. Again, right here, 10 degrees and 2,170 are coterminal. But now if I went in a negative direction, so right now, both angles are 10 degrees. So if I went negative, I see again coterminal angles, 10 degrees, let's put it back, and negative 350. And we can begin to see the arithmetic. When I went around continuing in a counterclockwise, I was adding an additional 360 to get me coterminal. Now, because I'm going clockwise, in essence, I'm subtracting 360. 10 minus 360 does give you negative 350. And again, I could continue to subtract or continue to go in a clockwise direction. And again, infinite numbers. So every time my terminal sides line up, I have another set of coterminal angles, just to illustrate from a visual standpoint. All right, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. So what we'll do is we'll look at actually finding some. So finding coterminal angles. To find coterminal angles, you simply add or subtract 360 degrees or 2 pi to each angle, depending upon whether the given angle is in degrees or radians. In the previous example, it was purely working with degrees. But as you know, we can also have angles in radians. So 360 degrees is the exact same thing as 2 pi radians. So, and also, you saw from the illustration, there are an infinite number of coterminal angles. So we'll look at a couple examples. First example says, find a coterminal angle between 0 degrees and 360. Notice in the directions they're being specific as to what coterminal we want. If we saw that there were an infinite number of coterminal angles, if I was to ask 15 people, give me a coterminal angle, I can get 15 different responses. So what the directions is doing is specifying which of those infinite coterminal angles we're wanting you to give. So this is the one that is between 0 and 360 degrees. So the original angle is negative 760. The only way I can go from negative 760 to an angle between 0 and 360 is to start adding by 360 degrees. So I start adding. Here when I add my first 360, this is a coterminal angle, negative 400, but it's not between the given criteria. So I continue to add another 360. Negative 40 is another coterminal, but it's not between 0 and 360. So I continue to add another 360 until I get to a number that fits the criteria, 320 degrees. So 320 degrees would be the coterminal angle to negative 760 that fits the criteria. That's going to be the key. This is the part of the problem that will indicate what you should do, add or subtract, to the original number, and how often you should add or subtract. Another problem, 819 degrees. So the only way I can go from 819 to end up between 0 and 360 is to simply subtract 360. So there's my 819, subtracting my 360, 459. 459 is not between, so I continue to subtract. 99 is between 0 degrees and 360, so I am done. 99 degrees is the coterminal angle between the 0 degrees and 360. All right. Now it says find a positive and negative coterminal angle. So again, it's giving you the criteria to work within. So I got 522 degrees. So I need to get a positive and negative coterminal. Now what you can't do is say, well, 522 is already positive. No, it's assuming you want a different positive coterminal angle. So what I'm going to do is kill two birds with one stone. Instead of me thinking, okay, to get the positive, I add, and to get the negative, I subtract, I recognize at some point to get to this negative, I'm going to have to subtract. But on the way to the negative, I will actually end up with some positives. This is what I mean. Take the 522, I subtract 360, I still have a positive answer. So by subtracting here, I actually get my first positive coterminal angle. So 162 is the positive part of my answer. So If I take that 162 and continue to subtract, I end up with my first negative coterminal angle. Now, you do have an option. You could have added 522 to 360 and you would have gotten a positive coterminal angle. And if you would have taken the 522 and subtracted, thinking to get your negative, unbeknownst to you, you would have gotten to the 162 prior to getting to the negative 198. So 162 and negative 198 are not the only answers. You could have gotten an infinite amount of others, but these are the two answers that get you to the answers with the least amount of effort. Simply subtracting 360 twice. Alrighty, negative 641. The only way I think get to some positives is to add here. I'm sorry. So when we add the 360, negative 281. Bam, there's our first negative answer. Negative 281 is our first negative coterminal angle. If I add again, 79 degrees, there's my first positive angle. One more, 278. Now this is a unique one here. With 278, if I add 360, it will give me my positive. And if I go back to the 278 and subtract, then it gives me my negative. So here you have to consider, where am I starting and what's the most efficient way to get to where I need to get. So now we'll transition to radians. It says find a coterminal angle between 0 and 2 pi. All right, we got negative 5 pi over 3. Well, the only way we can get to between 0 and 2 pi, which is a positive amount, is to go in a positive direction. Because we're dealing with radians, we won't go 360 degrees. We will go 2 pi radians. So if we add 2 pi radians, it begins to go in the correct direction. So the math we'll do in the calculator will not deal with the pi's. We'll just play with the numbers in the calculator. So in the calculator, negative 5 divided by 3 plus 2. Calculator says 1/3 as a fraction. We now recognize, 1/3 is between 0 and 2. So our answer, pi over 3. We'll do another one. 13 pi over 4. Now, again, if you understand, this is still an improper fraction. 4 goes into 13 3 times with 1 left over, which means we are greater than 2 pi. So here, the only way I can get between 0 and 2 is to subtract. So I'll take my 13 pi over 4, subtract my 2 pi. Into the calculator, we're just going to do 13 divided by 4 minus the 2. Calculator says as a fraction, 5 over 4. So therefore my answer is 5 pi over 4. And of course, 5/4 is between 0 and 2. All right, another example, this last one. Now find a positive and negative coterminal angle. So hopefully up to this point, you're realizing there's two separate sets of directions. You're either going to be asked to find an angle between 0, 360 or 0, 2 pi, or find both a positive and negative angle. So here we go. 313 pi over 90. So we'll do the same thing. Recognize if I got to get both, the most efficient way is to start subtracting. So when I subtract my 2 pi, put it into the calculator, there's my answer. I pick up where I left off. Take this 133 pi, subtract another 2 pi, put it into the calculator, there's my answer. Negative 47 pi over 4. So we get both the positive and the negative. One last example. Same thing. I'm going to add my 2 pi. 1 over 18, there's my positive, pi over 18. And from here, now I'm going to subtract my 2 pi, and that will help me to get the negative. So I got my positive and my negative. So hopefully this helps with understanding how to find both coterminal angles, both degrees and radians.